Merci de prendre place.
Please take your seats so we can get down to work.
Alors, comme convenu,
As agreed before our lunch break, we're going to resume work on the last agenda item on this morning's agenda, that is to say, document PC 27, Doc 29. This document was prepared by the Secretariat, and I would invite them to introduce it. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document PC 27, Doc 29 refers to the decisions 19.249 and 19.250 on Brazil wood, or Bauracilea guinata. The document prepared by the Secretariat provides an update on the study to assess and monitor the implications of the amendment to Annotation 10 on the conservation and international trade of Brazil wood. In spring this year, the study was initiated thanks to a financial contribution from the United Kingdom. The Secretariat appreciates the support in this regard. The study is structured to deliver three outputs. The first one, a study on possible options towards the establishment of a traceability system for Bauracilea guinata boughs. The second one, relating to a study of cross-cutting matters relevant to the implementation of decisions 19.251 and 19.252, including enforcement, stockpile management, and capacity building needs. And finally, a consolidated report on improved implementation of the Appendix II listing of Bauracilea guinata. In paragraph 8 of the document, the Secretariat had indicated its intention to provide an oral update on the progress of the study. While preliminary draft findings of the desk review on options towards the establishment of the traceability system is now available, the Secretariat wishes to refine the draft before providing specifics on its findings. In this regard, Madam Chair, we would suggest revising our original recommendations that are found in paragraph 9 of the document. So our first recommendation to the Plants Committee, where we were inviting it in paragraph 8 to note the progress achieved, that one still stands. So we would still invite the Plants Committee to note the progress achieved in undertaking the study called for under the decision 19.249. However, since we are not yet ready to provide specifics on the progress of the study, and particularly the first output, we would recommend rather deleting the recommendation under paragraph 9b, so that would be excluded. And instead of paragraph C, where we had initially stated that the Plants Committee is invited to agree that the decision 19.250 has been implemented, we would prefer to change that last recommendation so that the Plants Committee would agree for the Secretariat to include in our report to SC 78 a reflection on the status of the implementation of decision 19.50. This because we believe at this stage it is premature to conclude that deleting that decision is warranted. Thank you, Madam Chair.
merci, Secrétariat.
I would like to thank the Secretariat for that introduction. You've all heard about PC 27, Doc 29, with the recommendations that you have in para 9 of the document. I'm eager to hear from you on this. Committee members, you have the floor.
Amérique centrale du Sud.
Central and South America and the Caribbean, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have noted the progress made, and we think that the implementation of the traceability system and the legal strengthening measures are going to help to conserve and protect this species. Cooperation involving governments, intergovernmental organizations, and non-governmental organizations are going to be vital for us to continue to make progress here. We would certainly agree with the Secretariat's proposals as amended. Thank you, Madam.
Je remercie la
I would like to thank the representative of Central, South America, and the Caribbean. Would anyone else like to take the floor? Committee members? Observer parties? Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to express our appreciation to the Secretariat for the update on the progress made with the implementation of the study on Pau-Brasilia equinata. Brazil is closely monitoring the studies mentioned in the document. As is known, Brazil wood occurs spontaneously, exclusively in Brazilian territory. The species is endemic to Brazil and gives its name to our country. Brazil maintains the firm position that the entire CITES community must commit to controlling the trade of products derived from Brazil wood, under penalty of worsening the risk of extinction of the species. The studies mentioned are crucial in helping ensure that materials of illegal origin do not appear legal, thereby protecting the integrity of conservation efforts. It is of crucial importance to take into account the establishment of a traceability system that includes unfinished products, bowl blanks, and the stocks of discarded materials as part of the production process during the manufacture of the bowls. Additionally, cross-cutting matters, including enforcement, stockpile management, and capacity building, must be considered. It is also vital that we consider the broader implications of this study. The conservation of Brazil wood is not just a national issue, but a global responsibility. International collaboration and support are essential in developing sustainable practices. We urge all parties to actively participate and contribute to these efforts, recognizing the shared benefits of preserving our natural heritage, including for the music industry, which relies on Brazil wood for the crafting of high-quality bowls for stringed instruments. We acknowledge the progress made in conducting this study and look forward to its outputs. Thank you.
Je remercie le Brésil.
I would like to thank Brazil for that statement. The floor is open. Observer parties and observers, you have the floor.
Je donne la parole à I.
I give the floor to IPCI France. Thank you, Madam, for giving me the floor. I am speaking on behalf of the IPCI and Caffeine, among others. On behalf of my colleagues, I would like to thank the Secretariat for the preparation of document 29 now before us. Since the decisions taken 19249 to 19253 at COP19, we have had international organization in order to follow the Secretariat's and Standing Committee's recommendations. we have a particularly heated 19249 and 19252 of traceability and 251 on the records of pre-convention stocks of Pau Brasilia echinata. The cornerstone of traceability, be it for unworked wood or new boughs, or the registration of pre-convention boughs, are all vital. And we would invite members and their respective relevant authorities to set up an international registration system, and we would be happy to work with them nationally in different countries to ensure that we can know what is happening. We have a question of the movement of pre-convention stocks, and that is vital to our profession throughout the world. We also must bear future generations of musicians in mind, because they are responsible for the continuation of our culture. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, sir. I would now like to give the floor to the International Society of Lute and Bow Makers. You have the floor.
I'm pleased to very briefly comment on behalf of the International Society of Violin and Bow Makers and a number of music instrument stakeholders. We thank the Secretariat for the preparation of Document 29. The decisions at the 19th Conference of the Parties substantially supported non-commercial and commercial cross-border movement of finished musical instruments containing Brazil wood, while providing Brazil with additional enforcement tools for exports. This outcome gave the musical instrument trade confidence in CITES' ability to balance trade and conservation effectively. In the weeks prior to this meeting, music sector stakeholders have engaged with and provided inputs to the CITES Secretariat's consultant leading the study, and will continue to support the development of the study to the extent we're able to be helpful. Information Document 9 contains a detailed description of the music sector's views and several actions before and since COP19 with respect to Brazil wood, and specifically regarding efforts undertaken to fulfill the mandate in Decision 19252 to explore ways to increase the voluntary traceability of bows, promote pre-convention stock registration, and sensitize global makers, sellers, and musicians regarding the status of the species. As the Secretariat and the parties take further action to implement the COP19 decisions and the related study, music instrument stakeholders stand ready to partner to achieve outcomes that conserve the species while facilitating ongoing trade and cultural activity involving musical instruments. Finally, I'd like to note, together with my other colleagues here from IPCI, of which I am also a member, that this year marks the 25th anniversary of IPCI's work in partnership with Brazilian counterparts, including the Brazilian government, to invest in science, replanting, and conservation of this very precious species that enables music that uplifts us all. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I would like to thank the speaker for his statement and now give the floor to SSN. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam. In the interests of time, we would simply like to say that SSN fully aligns itself with what Brazil has just said. And we also agree with the Central and South America and the Caribbean region. We feel that this is a vital issue for CITES. There is a need for clear, effective measures in order to ensure the implementation of the convention. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I would like to thank SSN for their statement. I do not see any further requests for the floor, so we can now conclude our discussions of this item. The Plants Committee takes note of the progress achieved in the study under decision 19249. The committee further agrees that the Secretariat, in its report to the Standing Committee, should include its thoughts on the implementation of 19249. Could I ask whether this conclusion of our discussions on PC 27, Doc 29 suits you? I see no objections. I would suggest that we move on to the next agenda item.
Le document PC 27.
PC 27 Doc 30 is the item we are now going to discuss. This document was prepared by the Secretariat, and I would invite the Secretariat to introduce it. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document PC 27 Doc 30 presents progress on the implementation of Decision 19254. Its annex contains the preliminary overview of African tree species listed in the appendices that we revised in the light of comments made at PC 26. The committee is invited to A, review and agree the updated list of African tree species and associated CITES processes contained in the annex to the present document. B, request the Secretariat to publish the updated list of African tree species and associated CITES processes contained in the annex on the website and the CITES and Forests webpage. C, encourage range states to advance the priorities identified and reflected in the updated list. And D, agree that decisions 19254 and 19255 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
Merci, Secrétaire.
Thank you, Secretariat. The floor is open to committee members.
Région Afrique, vous avez la parole.
Africa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Africa region thanks the Secretariat for preparation of a document, PC 27, Doc 30, on Africa tree species. The Africa region would like to comment on the annex of a document that with regards to Afzera species, we have been informed that Cameroon and the Congo-Brazzaville have already prepared and submitted their NDFs for the Afzera species, but also Democratic Republic of Congo and Gabon are in the process of finalizing their NDF. Also, before publishing, we request for the Secretariat to send a notification to the parties to show their intention of publishing the species with a time limit so that they can respond and agree on the intention that the Secretariat is going to do. So we think this will be accepted, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
I would like to thank the representative of the Africa region. Are there any other requests for the floor?
IBT, vous avez la parole.
Merci, Madame Chair.
Thank you, Madam. I believe Gabon had... Gabon has also finished their NDF, if I'm not mistaken.
Merci à l'ITB.
Thank you, ATIBT. The Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Normally, unless it's a case of a species country combination undergoing compliance processes, we do receive NDFs, but we explicitly post them on the website when the party requests us to do so. And I understand that this is the case for Gabon and Trocarpus Soyaxi. So I understand that this NDF is actually available in the NDF database of the CITES website. Thank you.
Je donne la parole au Mozambique.
Mozambique has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like also to mention that Mozambique has also submitted NDF for Afzilia, Pterocarpus, and also Kaya. It was in April, late April, so I haven't seen it on the database. Maybe we have to make a formal request. Thank you.
Merci, Mozambique.
Thank you, Mozambique. The Secretariat has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Normally, what we receive is requests for export quotas, and since these are voluntary national export quotas, on occasions, these come also for our information with the complementary non-detriment finding. However, it's not always clear for the Secretariat if it is only the request for the publication of that voluntary export quota, or if it is also the intention of the parties that we make those NDFs also available on the database. So I think to follow up on all of those cases for which we have already published a quota, but that the NDF is not yet in the database, we would appreciate just a simple email to the Secretariat confirming that you do also want the NDF to be made available in the website. Thank you.
Merci, Secretary.
I thank the Secretariat. Do we have any further requests for the floor?
Je n'en vois.
I see no request for the floor. So, on this item, the Plants Committee agrees the updated list of African tree species and associated CITES processes contained in the annex to the present document requests the Secretariat to publish the updated list of African tree species and the associated CITES processes contained in the annex to the present document on the CITES and Forests webpage, encourages range states to advance the priorities identified and reflect in the updated list of African tree species and associated CITES processes, which are contained in the annex to the present document, and agrees that decisions 19254 and 19255 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. These are the recommendations to the Plants Committee, which are in paragraph 9 of document PC27, document 30. Thank you.
Le point suivant.
The next item is on document PC27 Doc 31. This document will be introduced by the representative of Central and South America and the Caribbean, who has prepared the document. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. On behalf of Mr. Cesar Belteton Chacon, the Chair of the Intersessional Working Group on Neotropical Tree Species and representative of the Central and South America and the Caribbean region, I will present the document which refers to the outcome of the Working Group on Neotropical Tree Species. So first of all, we should recall that at the COP19 decisions 19257 to 19260 on neotropical tree species were adopted, and in particular decision 19257 established that the Plants Committee shall A. Update the list of neotropical tree species and the related CITES processes included in the Annex to document PC25 Doc 29. B, based on the above, establish priorities for strengthening the implementation of the Convention for the neotropical tree species concerned. C, cooperate with the parties in making progress with the priorities identified. And D, report on the results of this work to the Standing Committee and the Conference of the Parties as appropriate. So, on the basis of that, at the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee, the document PC26 Doc 33 was considered and an intersessional working group on neotropical tree species was established. First of all, it was agreed to remove the listing of species, including some species such as Araucaria araucana, Phytroia cuprioides, Gerodendron uviferum abies guatalamensis, Podocarpus parlatorei, Balmeastormia would be excluded from the prioritization process, and it was noted that there were other CITES listed neotropical species that are priority for the parties who are range states. So it was recommended that projects be designed and promoted to build capacities, including matters such as research on population studies, management plans, identification of species and timber, non-detriment findings, legal acquisition findings, and traceability in the trade of the species that are subject to the recommendation. It was also recommended that mechanisms for cooperation with governmental, intergovernmental, and non-governmental be established in order to obtain funding to enable implementation of prioritized activities, and the Secretariat's report was required for that. The Secretariat was invited to publish a notification to the parties requesting range states of neotropical tree species to consider whether or not to confirm the prioritized list prepared by the working group and identify the priorities that needed implementation strengthening. And following notification 2023-083, we have received information from intergovernmental and non-governmental organizations, and further fundraising efforts will be geared towards new projects based on the range states reports and results following the notification. In order to widen this to more stakeholders, the working group contributed further information on analysis, both on priority species, but also on the work plans and ideas for capacity building. We welcome the work that came from Brazil, the USA, Mexico and Peru, and WWF, amongst others. There was a great deal of overlap amongst the responses received. And therefore, in relation to the assessment of the implementation of the decisions 19257 to 19259, was decided to work with species within the genera Handroanthus, Dipteryx, which will soon be coming into force, and they will be added to the list of the species Araucana, Fitzroya cuprisoides, Pilgerodendron uviferum, Podocarpus parlatore, and Balmia stormia. With regard to the priorities for the strengthening of the convention, there's an area where it should foster the projects that strengthen range states' work in terms of the NDFs and legal acquisition frameworks. And this is linked to the strengthening of forest management and tracing timber distribution. In terms of decisions 19260, the document 083 on the Guatemaltensis project, that if appropriate, there would be note of the irregular cross-border movements of the species. So the Plants Committee is invited to recommend the publication of the findings and conclusions of the intersessional working group on the CITES and Forest webpage. The Plants Committee is also invited to consider the decisions to have been fully implemented and to inform the COP20 of that, and to recommend that the Standing Committee take note of the information submitted by Mexico regarding irregular cross-border movements of species Avies guatemaliensis between Mexico and Guatemala, and to make consultations in order to obtain further information and relevant analysis. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Je remercie la représentante.
I thank the representative of the Intersessional Working Group on Neotropical Tree Species, and I now open the floor to members of the committee.
Néanmoins, avant, je voudrais souligner.
However, before that, I would like to stress the issue of translation that there is within the recommendations in B and C. In B, it is stated, consider the decisions that have been fully implemented at COP20. But if we were to refer to the text, the original text in the Spanish version, it says, agree that decisions 19257 through to 19260 have been implemented. And in C, there is mention of the cross-border movements. So it's an issue with the translations of the document in paragraph 25 of document PC 27 to doc 31. So the decisions, the recommendations are in the document.
Je ne vois pas de demande de parole.
I see no request for the floor from members of the Plants Committee. Now I open the floor to observer parties. Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Our delegation would like to provide some clarification on the response of Mexico to the notification 2023/083 on Habeas Guatemaliensis, which is in paragraphs 15 and 24 of the document before us. So it says that Mexico noted that there are irregular cross-border movements of specimens of Habeas guatemalensis between Mexico and Guatemala. When, in fact, the response that Mexico gave to that notification says clear textually, the authority for the compliance with the law in Mexico has been aware from communication from the authorities in Guatemala through bilateral meetings between Mexico and Guatemala that there are presumed cross-border irregular movements of specimens of Habeas guatemalensis. So this could be a risk factor for said taxa. We are concerned that this mention is appearing in the government as irregular cross-border movements, since it is presumption and not of illegal activities that have been documented. The aim of Mexico in mentioning this matter was to anticipate any risk to the species and to seek collaboration with range states, and that is why we would please ask that this be amended and that we include the word presumed in the working document and will remove the recommendation C. So we are pleased to announce that Mexico will offer to develop the periodic review of Habeas guatemalensis in thinking of document S PC 27, Doc 31, looking at the overview of species for review, which will be examined at our joint meeting with the Animals Committee on Saturday. We have held consultations with other range states for the species in order to call on them to work with us and contribute relevant information for this review. So, Madam Chair, we would suggest to the Plants Committee that the efforts made by Mexico be borne in mind when it comes to holding these consultations and awaits its outcome before making recommendations such as we see in the paragraph C of the recommendations. So that is something that we consider based on a presumption of events that have not been officially confirmed. Thank you very much.
Je remercie
I thank the representative of Mexico, and we have listened to your proposal as submitted regarding recommendation C. I think the Secretariat was able to take a good note of what was said, and you have a recommendation that would be amended, that is amended. Are there any delegations who wish to speak on that?
Je vois pas de demande.
I see no request for the floor.
OK. Donc,
So, to conclude, the Plants Committee recommends the publication of the findings and conclusions of the Intersessional Working Group on the CITES and Forests webpage, agrees that at the COP20 decisions 19257 to 19260 have been completed, and takes note of the comments made by Mexico at the plenary meeting. Thank you.
je donne la parole.
I now give the floor to the representative of the Central South America and Caribbean region to present document PC 27 Doc 34.
La parole.
The floor is yours.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So at this opportunity, on behalf of Chile, I have pleasure in introducing the document 34, which was included in the agenda at their request, in order to inform and request the support of this committee to the document for inclusion of the species Jubaea chilensis in Appendix I of the Convention, so that it can later be presented by Chile at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Chilean palm, Jubaea chilensis, is an endemic species of Chile whose distribution covers the regions of the center of the country and is concentrated in the regions of Valparaiso and O'Higgins. The arguments put forward by Chile are principally based on the fact that the species Jubaea chilensis, as set out in Article 2 of the text of the Convention, and the criterion A established in Annex 1 of Resolution Conf 9.24 Rev Cop 16, are met for the listing and inclusion of species in the appendices. And what I would like to highlight is that on the conservation status, the species is officially classified as endangered in accordance with that which is set out in the general laws in Chile on international trade. And the data that Chile has available from the National Customs Service is that between 2013 and 2023, there was a growing flow of export of its parts and derivatives, and it reaches figures of more than 169,000 kilos of fruit and more than 29,000 seeds, and more than 29,000 plants. And the exports are mainly to Germany, Italy, Spain, the Netherlands, Hong Kong, Macau, and the USA. This species is under legal protection and regulated under various rules and regulations in Chile. And the threats to the species, it is endemic to Chile, and in addition to having a very restricted distribution within the country, it presents and faces various threats, which include forestry, the extraction of its parts and derivatives, in particular fruits and seeds, the loss of habitat because of agricultural and changing land use, droughts and forest fires affect the species. In the last decade, there has also been the growth in the export of its fruit and seeds, which has, as a final factor, created a serious risk to the regeneration, recruitment, and at the end of the day, sustainability of the species. Because of all these reasons, on behalf of Chile and in the light of all these threats and the prolific trade, international trade, we call on the Plants Committee to take note of the proposal to include Jubaea chilensis in Appendix I and support this proposal, which will be submitted at COP20 of CITES. Thank you very much. I thank the representative of the South, Central America and Caribbean region and would like to hear if we have any comments or observations in the room. Brazil, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brazil would like to thank the information shared by Chile, and we support the proposal to be submitted at COP20. Thank you.
Merci au Brésil.
Thank you, Brazil. I now give the floor to Germany.
Thank you, Chair. Germany thanks Chile for submitting document 34 at PC 27 on the intention to include Jubaea chilensis in Appendix I. Germany is looking forward to assess the listing proposals once it's being made available. Thank you very much.
Je remercie l'Allemagne.
Thank you, Germany. USA.
Thank you, Chair. U.S. wishes to align with Germany's views. We thank Chile very much for bringing this proposal to the Plants Committee attention to provide some input. We think this is very good use of the process, and we look forward to seeing the proposal and evaluating it before we take official position at COP20. Thank you.
Je remercie les États.
Thank you, USA. I do not see any further requests for the floor. Yes, the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, on behalf of the Korean delegation, I'd like to express our deep appreciation for the efforts of the Chilean government to conserve this iconic plant, Jubaea chilensis, and I hope that these efforts will be effectively applied and the threat of the extinction will disappear. However, based on the information presented, I believe that further consideration is needed to determine whether the Chilean palms meet the criteria for Appendix I listing under Article 2 of the Convention. In addition, the fact that significant numbers of the species are already planted and maintained in many botanical gardens around the world means that international trade may not be easy to manage following Appendix I listing. In light of the above, my delegation requests that the Chilean authorities give further consideration to the proposal by the Conference of Parties, either in terms of criteria for listing in Appendix I or the inclusion of an annotation and so on. Thank you, Chair.
Je remercie la République.
I thank the Republic of Korea for their statement. There are no further requests for the floor. So, IWMC. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't know if there was a problem with the translation. I thought I had understood that Chile had announced in the French document that there was a potential submission to COP21, or whether it was to COP20. There was a little confusion on the number. I would like to have confirmation of the exact point at which Chile is planning to submit a proposal.
Merci, IWM.
Thank you, IWMC. I shall give the floor to the representative of the Central, South America and Caribbean region to give us more clarification. You have the floor. Yes, thank you. I think it might have been a problem. The proposal is to put forward and submit this proposal to COP20. Thank you.
Merci pour cette précision.
Thank you for that clarification. I now give the floor to Mexico.
Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. We join those who congratulate Chile in sharing the proposal to submit this species for inclusion in Appendix I. We would like to have more detailed information. We imagine they will draft up the proposal on Resolution 9.24 to have more information, but when it's normally a country of origin that is requesting the listing of an endemic species, it is something that is generally supported by the committee. So as soon as we have more detail and we see how international commerce is threatening the species, we will also be in a position to support the proposal, but we would like to see it developed further. Thank you.
Merci.
I thank the representative of Mexico. I will give the floor to SSN.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Network le solicita.
Species Survival Network would like to request of the Plants Committee that they take note of this document, and we welcome the initiative from Chile, and we are aware that they've been working strongly on the development of this proposal and collecting all the data possible so they can meet all the criterion of Resolution 9.24, and we are also aware that it is now at a draft stage for the proposal for this endemic palm, and we request very attentively to all countries that may have information on international commerce in the species that they please share it with Chile so that we can strengthen the proposal. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Je remercie
Thank you, SSN. I think that brings us to the end of our consideration of this item. This document has been submitted to the Plants Committee for consideration, and the committee does indeed take note of PC 27, Doc 34. Thank you.
Nous passons maintenant.
I would suggest that we now move on to agenda item 36. That is to say, document PC 27, document Doc 36, and I give the floor to the Secretariat to introduce the document. You have the floor. Thank you, Madam. The Secretariat was referring to document 36 on information systems for the trade in CITES listed trees. The party has revised the decision and adopted 18265 and asked for a study considering the feasibility and the possibilities of implementing an information system on trade in CITES-listed tree species. Since the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee and the 77th SC, the Secretariat has developed a specifications list for this study and shared the project with the Plants Committee. We've had comments from the from the chairs, as well as members of the representing the regions of the committee. We've also had responses from the ITTO and UNEP WCMC. Our specifications list has been revised, taking into account all of the observations received, and the Secretariat has begun to recruit a consultant, and the ad was published on the Secretariat website yesterday and will be made available to members of the committee. As foreseen in the TORs, members of the committee will be consulted with respect to the preliminary results of this study on the feasibility and possibility of the implementation of an information system on trade in CITES tree species before the final report is submitted, and the Secretariat will report to the Standing Committee at its 78th Commission. The committee is invited to take note of the progress made with respect to the implementation of Decision 19265. Thank you, Secretariat. You have just heard a report on document 36, and I give you the floor for your comments. Committee members, you have the floor.
Je ne vois pas de demande de parole.
I see no requests for the floor. Let me turn now to observer parties. The United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The United States supports noting the document and the Secretariat's progress in implementation of Decision 19.265. As we noted at the 77th meeting of the Standing Committee, while we support the development of an information system in principle, we do have some concerns about the potential complexities and costs of building such a system, including the need to collect additional data not currently included in the CITES trade database. We look forward to working with the Secretariat to address these issues and progress this work. Thank you, Chair.
Je remercie les États-Unis.
I would like to thank the United States for that. Are there any other observer members who would like to take the floor?
Je ne vois pas de demande.
I see no requests for the floor. I would now like to turn to observers. Any comments on Doc 36? I would now like to come back to committee members. The Central South America and the Caribbean region has the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have also taken note of the progress made by the Secretariat with respect to this decision. We recognize what challenges developing such a system involve, and we hope that they will continue to hold consultations. That way we will ensure that we have a very clear sense of the objectives and scope of this project, as well as its role within CITES. We do have the UNEP WCMC database, and it might be a matter of looking to see how that database could be strengthened with respect to trade issues and the kinds of matters to be covered by this information system. Thank you.
Je remercie.
I would like to thank the representative of the Central and South America and the Caribbean representative. I don't see any other requests for the floor. The Plants Committee takes note of the Secretariat's progress in the implementation of Decision 19265. Thank you.
Pour le point suivant,
With respect to the next item, I would like to give the floor to the Secretariat. The Secretariat will introduce PC 27, Doc 38. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Document PC 27, Doc 38 presents progress in implementing Decision 19268. Paragraph 3 of the document summarizes the 3 responses received to the notification to the parties number 2024-9 that we published in accordance with the Decision 19268. Paragraph 4 summarizes available information from the CITES legal trade database. Paragraphs 5 to 8 contain reflections of the Secretariat with regard to the long process that led to the adoption of the exemption in annotation 4G. And based on the preceding, the Plants Committee is invited to A, note that the Secretariat is not able to report on the conservation impacts of the exemption contained in annotation number 4G for the 5 concerned orchid species. B, encourages range states of the involved species and especially range states of Gastrodia elata to bring any concerns relating to changes in the status of their wild populations to the attention of the Secretariat and the Plants Committee. C, agree that decisions 19268 and 19269 have been implemented and report its conclusions to the Standing Committee. Thank you.
je remercie.
I would like to thank the Secretariat for that introduction. The Plants Committee members have the floor.
Europe, vous avez la parole.
Europe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to highlight in the document that Sweden noted an illegal trade in Gastrodia elata and the difficulty of enforcing without labelling a concern that unless it's clearly labelled as artificial propagation, which is not at the moment. So we have no way of knowing without labelling, but also highlighting that again. And again, we note the lack of information on the conservation status of some of these species is very concerning, and we suggest that decisions 19.268 and 269 be brought forward for another round of reporting and engagement. Thank you.
Merci.
I would like to thank the representative of the Europe region. Would any other members of the Plants Committee like to take the floor?
Région Europe.
Europe, I have a question for you. We have heard that you feel that decisions 19268 and 269 have not been fully implemented. You said that you would like to see those work to be continued on those decisions. Could you give us a sense of how you think it might be possible to obtain more information than we have managed to gather? No information has been forthcoming. Do you think that an extension of the time frame would allow us to gather more information? I've tried to summarize my understanding of the point you made.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose it really is what I was trying to say was that we have these concerns, and that that we really need to kind of look to these concerns, and that maybe we need to have another to see is there more information out there, because there was very small response to the notification, and that we're probably missing some more data here.
Merci, Europe.
Thank you, Europe. Could I ask if anyone else would like to respond? I give the floor to the representative of Central and South America and the Caribbean. You have the floor. Thank you, Madam. Speaking as the representative of Peru, I would like to say that with respect to the Cinochis cooperi, which is mentioned in the report, we do not have any sense of there being problems, because all trade involves artificially propagated species that are covered by national domestic legislation.
Je remercie.
I would like to thank Peru for that clarification. I believe there was an observer party or an observer who wished to take the floor, or an observer party. The United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and to the Secretariat for the update. Echoing comments from Sweden in PC 27 document 38, the UK would like it to be noted that we experience implementation challenges due to the inclusion of the wording artificial propagation in annotation 4, paragraph G. The UK developed domestic guidance on the use and enforcement of annotation 4 for orchid cosmetics to improve implementation. We therefore welcome the recommendations, in particular the encouragement of range states to put forward any concerns of wild populations of the 5 species listed in the exemption to help understand conservation impacts, which could help guide relevant discussions on annotations in the future if appropriate. Thank you.
Je remercie la...
Thank you, the UK. I now give the floor to China.
Thank you, Chair. China appreciates the Secretariat's efforts on this document. As the main distribution country of Gazetteer editor, China noted that the observations and recommendations of the Secretariat. In order to protect the wide population of Gazetteer editor, China has listed this species as the national key protection and carried out a field resource surveys to continuously monitor its wide population. And the China CITES Scientific Authority assessed this species as vulnerable according to IUCN standard. China has a long history of cultivation in Gazetteer editor, and the current cultivation scale is very huge, and the use of medicines, cosmetics, and food additives is derived from artificial resource. So we don't have much concern about the impact of international trade on its wild population. China will continue to strengthen the protection and monitoring of the wild population of the gastroadder, increase the population through the restoration of its habitat, and ease the pressure on the wild population by increasing support for artificial propagation. Thank you, Chair.
Merci.
Thank you, China. I now give the floor to India.
Thank you, Madam Chair. India is a rich state for Gastrodia elata and Phalaenopsis lobi. Gastrodia elata is vulnerable as per IUCN Red List of threatened species. Apart from several medicinal uses, Gastrodia elata is having high demand in cosmetic industries. However, authentic identification of samples with tubers, powder of dry tubers, other parts, etc., provided by the suppliers is often difficult. Gastrodia elata has also morphological similarities with Gastrodia falconeri and may be misidentified by the local suppliers, if not critically identified. Phalaenopsis lobi has morphological, as I just said here. Hence, there is need of a detailed scientific study of the traded samples in conforming identification. Also, it should be ensured that the product originate from artificially propagated specimens only. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Je remercie.
Thank you, India. Are there any further requests for the floor? Observers, you have the floor.
Je ne vois pas.
I see no further requests for the floor, and I have not noted any objections to Europe's remarks with respect to the recommendation 9C that we have in document PC 27 Doc 38. We are going to conclude our work on this item as follows. The Plants Committee takes note that the Secretariat has not been able to report on the conservation impacts of the exemption contained in annotation 4G on Blatilia striata, Cycnoches cooperi, Gastrodia elata, Phalaenopsis amabilis, and Phalaenopsis lobi. Encourages range states of the species involved, and especially range states of Gastrodia elata, to bring any concerns relating to changes in the status of their wild populations associated with harvest for international trade. This should be brought to the attention of the Secretariat and the Plants Committee. The Plants Committee agreed that decisions 19268 and 19269 are to be renewed and shall report its conclusions to the Standing Committee. This brings us to the end of our consideration of this agenda item. Thank you.
Dernier point à l'ordre du...
We've come to our last agenda item for today, and that's good news. PC 27, Doc 39. It's PC 27, Doc 39. The chair apologizes. I misspoke and said Doc 29. I think I've come to the end of my working day. As I was saying, we've come to PC 27, Doc 39 on the annotation of Cape Aloe. This document, I do apologize. Asia, you have the floor.
Sorry, Chad. We have to interrupt you for the new item, since before you make the conclusion for the last items, we don't have the chance to provide our view on the recommendation for that item. And we think here, after we're hearing the RAN state have these responses at this meeting, so we propose to revise the paragraph B of the Plants Committee's recommendations to take note that some RAN states of the species involved, and especially the RAN states of Gastrula elata has responded their concerns at the meeting and continue encouraging the RAN states, etc. Things, yeah. Thank you, Chair.
I thank the Asia representative. This concerns document PC 27, Doc 38, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you. As I have understood, Madam, you're suggesting an amendment to the recommendations in paragraph 9. Could you please give us your proposal? I give you the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Since it's a kind of the rush time, I'm trying to express it. It seems like, note that the RAN states of, or two RAN states of Gastrula elata have provided concerns relating, maybe we can, their concerns, and continue to encourage RAN states, etc. It's the similar things as the original text. Yeah, since we're not really the native English speaker, so yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Je donne la parole à la représentante.
I give the floor to the Europe representative.
In our understanding, it was not a concern raised by the two range states. It was more like an information they brought up, so I think concern wouldn't be the right expression. Maybe you can redraft that in English. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. That was my understanding, which is, I did try to reflect the comments made by the two range states in question in my recommendations. But let me give the floor to the representative of Asia. I would note, however, that the range states for these species did not object to my conclusions, but I would like to hear again from the representative from Asia. You have the floor.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying to clarify why we're making that revision. It seems like for our recommendations is encourage the range state of the species, but we still have some of the responses, and we hear that, so we can note the responses of the range state of Gastoria elata during the meeting, and encourage the range state. So, yeah. So it's just like the response at the meeting, so we can note that. Thank you.
Okay, je remercie.
Thank you, the representative of Asia, for clarifying your proposal. I'm not going to take on board all of the recommendations made, but I would say that recommendation 9A stands unchanged. Then we'll have B saying the Plants Committee notes the information furnished by two range states of Gastrodia elata, and then the current B will become C, encourage range states of the species, and the rest remains unchanged. So we will add one sub-paragraph if Asia is happy with that. Thank you, and thank you one and all.
Merci. Donc,
Thank you. So, the last item on our agenda is document PC 27 Doc 39 on annotation of Cape Aloe. I give the floor to the Secretariat, who has prepared the document.
Chair. Document PC 27 Doc 39 presents progress in the implementation of decisions 18323 and 323 Rev COP 19. On request of the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee, the Secretariat has undertaken a number of additional information gathering steps not mandated under these decisions. Paragraphs 4 to 6 and Annex 1 contain an updated trade analysis. Paragraphs 7 to 9 and Annex 2 summarize information received through an additional notification and other consultations. And paragraph 10 contains our conclusions on these matters. Based on the preceding, the Plants Committee is invited to consider the information provided and the Secretariat's conclusions in paragraph 10 of the present document, and B, to agree that decisions 18.323 and 324 Rev COP 19, as well as the additional requests made by PC 26, have been implemented, and propose the deletion of the decisions to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Thank you.
je remercie le secrétaire.
I thank the Secretariat, and I now give the floor to members of the Plants Committee.
Membres du comité, vous avez...
Committee members, the floor is yours.
Partis ayant statut d'observateur.
Observer parties.
Afrique du Sud.
South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa appreciates the information put together by the Secretariat and agrees that the decisions 18.223 and 18.24 revised at COP19, as well as the additional requests made by PC26 have been implemented and supports the proposal for the deletion of the decision as recommended by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Merci, Afrique du Sud.
I thank you, South Africa. Are there any further requests for information from observer parties?
Je ne vois pas.
I do not see any further requests for the floor. Observers, do you wish to take the floor?
Je ne vois pas.
I do not see any further requests for the floor. Therefore, to conclude, the Plants Committee has considered the information provided and the Secretariat's conclusions in paragraph 10 of the present document and agrees that decisions 18323 Rev Cop 19 and 18324 Rev Cop 19, as well as the additional requests made by PC26, have been implemented and proposes the deletion of the decisions at the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties. Are there any objections to these conclusions?
Je n'en vois pas.
I do not see any. Therefore, we have finished with this item on our agenda, and we have finished Thursday, the 11th of May on our agenda. Thank you.
Mais nous allons passer.
So we will now move to the reports from the working groups. We've finished our day, but not completely.
Bonjour, rebonjour.
So, hello again. We have the ComDocs and PC 27 Com1 was published yesterday, and that covers the report of the working group. The document is entitled Selection of Species for the Periodic Review, so I shall give the floor to the chair of the working group to report to us. Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yes, indeed. The working group on the selection of species for the periodic review met on Monday afternoon. And we had a mandate which was to establish a schedule for the periodic review of the appendices, and based on outputs indicated in paragraph 8 of document 33.2, to identify a list of plant taxa to review during the next intersessional period up until COP21, and to report on the recommendations to the committee. The working group discussed Annex A of document 33.2, in particular output 1, and proposes the following species be reviewed in terms of sources and purposes of trade to ascertain whether the Appendix I listing is being managed appropriately regarding the source and purpose codes. So there are 3 species: Saussurea costus, Aloe backeri, Aloe haworthioides. The working group also recommends to the Plants Committee that they invite the Secretariat to engage with parties related to the reported trade in the species, requesting that they verify the source of the specimens in trade and the correct use of purpose codes. It also would also ask that the Standing Committee have their attention drawn to the list in paragraph 1 and that clarification provided by parties in response to the Secretariat's request for verification of the source of specimens in trade, and that there is the correct use of purpose codes. The working group also discussed Annex 2 of the document, in particular outputs 3 and 4, and selected the 15 species as candidates for potential review under Resolution Conf 14.8. The 15 species are the output 3 and output 4, which are species from Appendix II. I won't read them to save time. And in addition, the working group acknowledged that the species identified under output 2 were considered during the 26th meeting of the Plants Committee, and therefore the working group agreed that there was no need to review those species. The working group also noted that in accordance with Resolution 14.8, the Secretariat shall send a copy of the proposed list of taxa to be reviewed to all parties and shall request range states of the taxa to comment within 60 days on whether they support a review of the taxa. And if no one should volunteer to do this in the period between the COP meetings, they will be removed from the list of species to be reviewed. Thank you.
Merci
I thank the chair of the working group for having presented the report of the working group. I would also like to submit and await your comments. Members of the committee, any comments?
Amérique centrale du Sud.
Central, South America and the Caribbean. You have the floor. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to give some clarification on 3 when it comes to the species Fitzroya cupresoides. The range states should have Argentina and Chile, and I think there is typing a transcription area. It said AR and CL, which are the abbreviations for Chile. Thank you.
Merci à la représentante.
I thank the representative for Central, South America and the Caribbean for that clarification. Do we have any further request for the floor?
Je n'en vois pas d'autres.
I see none.
Aussi,
So, the Plants Committee... Mexico has requested the floor. You have the floor.
Sí, gracias, señor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As Mexico, we would like to request that in the document we also see Mexico amongst the parties that participated in this working group. It should have appeared in the COM1 document and also in the SUM1 document. Maybe the error arose because I was asked to chair the meeting and therefore we omitted that Mexico also participated. Thank you.
c'est bien noté.
It's noted, Mexico. Do we have any further request for the floor?
Je n'en vois.
I see none. So, the Plants Committee adopts document PC 27-1 as amended at the meeting. I thank you.
Pour information.
For information, documents PC 27 COM2 and COM3 are now available.
Comme il nous reste du temps.
As we still have time available.
Donc, les documents PC20.
Document PC 27 COM2, COM3 and COM4 are now available. Thank you.
Non, nous allons.
So we shall now move to the consideration of document of the PC 27 SUM documents, which are the executive summaries of our meetings.
Donc, vous disposez déjà de.
So you now have this document PC 27 SUM 1 and SUM 2, and so we will reflect that. Bless you, madam. So we are going to reflect in the corresponding SUM document the amendment of the membership of the working group as requested by Mexico. Are there any other comments on these documents? I await your comments.
Alors, nous allons commencer par.
So we shall start with PC 27 SUM 1. This is the document that. No, it's not this document. In PC 27 SUM 1, do we have any comments to that document?
Je ne vois pas.
I do not see any request for the floor. So the Plants Committee adopts document PC 27 SUM 1 as amended at the meeting.
Nous passons maintenant au document PC27, somme.
So now we shall move on to document PC27, Sum 2. Are there any comments, members of the committee?
Je ne vois pas de demande d'intervention.
I see no request for the floor. Observer parties.
Pas de demande de parole. Observateurs.
Observers?
Pas de demande.
No request for the floor. So PC27, Sum 2 is adopted.
Merci. Donc, nous avons le PC27.
We have PC27 COM2, which is available. So this is on guidance on the term artificially propagated. I shall ask the Secretariat to read the document.
Thank you, Chair. PC27 COM2, the Plants Committee requested the Secretariat to, in cooperation with regional representatives for Asia, Europe, North America, and Oceania, prepare an in-session document to show the edits to the guidance on terms related to the artificial propagation of CITES regulated plants and the draft decisions proposed in plenary, noting that any changes to the title of the guidance should be reflected in the draft decisions that were also considered. The Secretariat would like to point out that in the annex to the document, the feedback received during the consultation was to retain preliminary as part of the guidance and to not accept the amendment proposed by North America region. So the title at the moment in Annex 2 is Preliminary Guidance on Terms Related to the Artificial Propagation of CITES Regulated Plants, and it was amended like that throughout the document. The other change proposed by the North America region during plenary was on page 8, relating to mixed tree species plantations. So I just want to draw your attention to that, and it reads, species derived from mixed tree species plantations are not discussed in Resolution Conf 10.13, RevCop 18. However, mixed-tree species plantations can qualify as artificially propagated if the trees grown meet the criteria of Resolution Conf 11.11, Ref Cop 18, paragraph 2. If the trees do not meet the criteria for artificially propagated, they may meet the criteria for assisted production, source code Y, see section on plants obtained through assisted production. I would also like to mention that the proposal from Asia on page 14 in the footnote 16 was also included. So that now reads, in addition to Resolution Conf 12.3, Ref Cop 19, for the definition of artificial propagated specimen for agar wood producing taxa, the reader must refer to Resolution Conf 16.10, and for tree species shall refer to Resolution Conf 11.11, Ref Cop 18, or Resolution Conf 10.13, Ref Cop 18. I would like to note that due to the fact that we had a very specific mandate agreed by plenary, the Secretariat did not take into consideration a proposal from Europe, as it was not raised during the plenary. And Chair, if the meeting allows, maybe they could raise that now during this discussion. And in the same way, since the rules are also applicable to the Secretariat would also like to use the opportunity to propose a small amendment to Decision 20.AA in the annex to include subject to external funding. So the decision to read the Secretariat shall, subject to external funding, maintain the preliminary guidance, and it continues from there on. But if you allow, Chair, also to, for the representative from Europe to propose this proposed change. Thank you, Chair.
Madame la représentante de l'Europe, vous avez...
Representative for Europe, you have the floor to present this amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Our amendment is on page 12, and it's the second paragraph or line, and it says, assisted production is cultivation being carried out by local communities without the use of advanced technologies, and where this may be a significant source of income. We suggest that this sentence is misleading, and it's a limited understanding of assisted production, and assisted production is not necessarily limited to local communities, and there's no kind of precondition for them to abstain using any advanced technologies. So I think we could just get rid of that sentence. That would be very good. Thank you.
Merci.
I thank the Europe region representative. Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to suggest and propose that the term preliminary be removed again. I apologise. In my intervention yesterday, I think my Australian laziness in the way I speak may have been misinterpreted, and being otherwise distracted by RST, I missed it in the final ComDoc. I have liaised with my fellow representatives from Asia, Europe and North America, and we are all in agreement that the document can stay as it is in the original agenda document as guidance on the term artificially propagated. Thank you, Chair.
Merci, Océanie. Donc,
thank you, Oceania.
Nous pouvons...
So, we can remove the word preliminary from the annex to the document.
OK. Donc,
So, on the document PC 27-2, these are the conclusions of the Plants Committee. So, the Plants Committee approves the amendments to the document Guidance on Terms Related to the Artificial Propagation of CITES Regulated Plants by removing the term preliminary before the word guidance, which can be found in Annex 2 of the present document, and with the amendments as proposed by Europe. We approve the draft decisions contained in Annex 1 to the present document for submission to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, in accordance with the amendments by the Secretariat.
Yeah. It will come later. OK. Demande le comité pour le...
The Plants Committee requests the Secretariat to publish the two guidance documents on its website and to reflect the amendments mentioned above where appropriate. Agrees that decisions 19182 to 19183 have been implemented and can be proposed for deletion to the 20th meeting of the Conference of the Parties, and invites parties to support the translation of the guide to the application of CITES source codes, the guide to the application of CITES source codes into additional languages referred to in paragraph 9 of document PC 27-22. So I have now read the recommendations that have been provided at our meeting and amended here. I have the Republic of Korea, who has requested the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I apologize that I am speaking on update to the information in paragraph 9 of original document, PC 27-22, rather than this COMDA. I would like to make a brief statement if the chair will allow me to do so. May I speak?
Oui, vous pouvez.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. The Republic of Korea already translated the guide to the application CITES source code into Korean and have been utilizing it in our work since 2018. The Korean translation file was submitted as PC 27 in point 14. We would like to request the Plants Committee to take note of the Korean translation and, if appropriate, reflect it on the relevant page in the CITES website in this document. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Corey?
Thank you, Korea. We will take note of your observation and will ensure that it is reflected in the summary of our discussions for today. Mexico, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam. Mexico supports the draft decisions proposed as amended, and we feel that this guidance should be kept as a living document. We do have some concern with the text on pages 5 and 6, where it says that source code D can be used for trade in Appendix I listed species for the establishment of registered or not registered places. This is ambiguous language. We need to ensure that we are consistent. So we have with respect to the treatment of plants and animals that are Appendix I listed, to ensure that they have conservation in situ. These are issues that were identified as significant in the intersessional working group with respect to CITES consideration of trade in non-wild plants and animals. These issues will be dealt with in PC 21 and AC 3325. We would therefore like to suggest to the Plans Committee that we have 20DD as an additional decision. The Plans Committee shall analyze and identify possible inconsistencies with respect to the source code D in 12.3 on permits and certificates and 9.19 on the registration of places that artificially propagate Appendix I listed species of flora for export, and Decision 1111 on the regulation of trade in plants. I would recall that in Article 2, the Convention establishes a fundamental principle that trade in Appendix I listed species must be subject to a particularly strong regulation in order to avoid threatening survival. Such trade should be authorized only under exceptional circumstances. We need to ensure that there is consistency among these resolutions that will make it easier for us to ensure that we can deal with this code with respect to plants. Thank you.
Merci.
I thank you, Mexico. I'm going to give the floor to Georgia, and then we will come back to your proposal to the draft decision in Annex 1 with the addition of 20DD. Georgia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to thank the Secretariat and the UNEP WCMC for preparing this updated version of the document. From our perspective, this looks that it should be quite useful in our daily work. We also support the recommendations outlined in the COM document as amended here at this meeting. And also we consider that this document should be updated based on the feedback from the parties, and we assume that they would need some time, probably 1 year or
2 years to test the guidance, and then based on the feedback it could be updated, or if necessary based on any amendments in the relevant resolutions. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci.
Thank you. I think that your concern is reflected in decision 20AA. So let's come back to the proposed amendment to Annex 1 with 20DD as suggested by Mexico. Does anyone have any objection to the suggested amendment? Committee members?
Océanie, vous avez la parole.
Oceania, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Could I maybe ask Mexico to read it out one more time for us?
Mexique, vous avez la parole.
Mexico, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam.
Understanding, maybe we already translated. So 20DD could say to analyze and identify possible inconsistencies on the use of source code D in resolutions 12.3 Rev Corps 19 on permits and certificates, 9.19 RepCo 15 on registration of nurseries that artificially propagate specimens of Appendix I plant species for export purposes, and 11.11 RepCo 18 on regulation of trade in plants, and provide recommendations on how to address them. Thank you very much.
Merci.
Thank you, Mexico, for reading that proposal. Oceania, do you have any thoughts?
I'm just wondering whether instead of singling out one source code, it could just apply to all source codes. Because it would be the interpretation and the implementation of any of them that we might want to understand. But I could be wrong.
Mexique, avez-vous entendu?
Mexico, have you heard Oceania's comment? Do you have any thoughts?
Señora Presidenta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're referring specifically to Code D with respect to its application to plants. I'm not sure that the Oceania proposal had to do with other codes apart from D. Could he perhaps clarify what his suggestion was? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I was wondering whether we want to single out one single source code in the decision, or whether we want to leave it open to be able to consider the implementation of any source codes used in relation to artificial propagation. So rather than restricting it to one, giving us the opportunity to review it for any. I'm not opposed to what Mexico is suggesting. I'm just wondering whether we want to limit ourselves so much.
Europe, vous avez la parole.
Chair, I think we would like to support the suggestion made by our colleague from Oceania. Thank you.
Et avant de vous donner la parole,
Before I give Mexico the floor, the Secretariat has a proposal that might suit Europe and Oceania. On the use of source code D, we could say the use of source codes for plants. Could I ask Mexico if that is a proposal that would suit you? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, we're flexible. I mean, this effort can benefit to analyze more, but as long as Code D is revised, we're happy. Thank you.
Parfait, et merci.
Great. Thank you very much for being so flexible.
OK. Donc, je vais vous faire...
I'm going to read the amended decisions to you. I'm awaiting the French translation. With respect to recommendations A, B, C, D, and E, which I read out earlier, I think that's all okay. I'm now awaiting the translation of the draft decision 20DD.
OK, je vais essayer de m'en sortir parce que je dois lire ici.
I seem to be having to read in all sorts of directions, so please bear with me. Draft decisions on guidance on terms with the term artificially propagated. With respect to the Secretariat, with the reserve, if external funding is found, retains the document with respect to the guidance on terms related to the artificial propagation of CITES regulated plants and the implementation of CITES source codes as living documents, evolving documents, and in the light of comments made by parties and any relevant amendments adopted by the Conference of the Parties, and shall submit any amendments to the Plants Committee for approval. That is 20AA. This directed to the parties, 20BB. Parties are encouraged to use the guidance on terms related to the artificial propagation of CITES regulated plants and the guide to the application of CITES source codes and to provide feedback and information to the Secretariat. Directed to the Plants Committee, Decision 20CC, the Plants Committee shall approve any revisions to the guidance on terms related to artificial propagation of CITES regulated plants, repeated in French, and the guide to the application of CITES source codes, 20DD.
D.
20DD. Analyze and identify possible inconsistencies in the use of source codes for plants. This is a slight amendment to Mexico's language, in brackets, with the exclusion of source code W, close brackets, and in resolutions 12.3 Rev Cop 19 on permits and certificates, 9.19 Rev Cop 15 on the registration of those who artificially propagate plants in Appendix I, and 11.1 Rev 1111 on the regulation of trade in plants, and provide recommendations on ways of dealing with them. Perhaps I should reread that, says the chair. 20DD. Analyze and identify any possible inconsistencies in the use of plant-related source codes, with the exception of source code W in resolutions 12.3 Rev Cop 19 on permits and certificates, 9.19 Rev Cop 15 on the registration of nurseries that artificially propagate plant specimens that are Appendix I listed for export purposes, and 11 Rev Cop 18 on the regulation of plant in trades, and provide recommendations on how to deal with them. That is 20DD. I see that there are requests for the floor. The U.S., you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The U.S. is a bit confused by the language in 20DD, in that we seek a clarification because our concern is that this decision is now very close to the mandate already being considered by the Working Group on the Review of Trade in Specimens not of wild source, and seems to be duplicative with that ongoing work. And therefore, our preference would be go back to the suggestion that was originally made by Mexico, which was very specific to what work needed to be done there, rather than broadening it with this new decision, unless the Secretariat can clarify that this is not duplicative. Thank you, given our limited resources.
Merci.
Thank you, the United States, for your statement. I am going to give the floor to Germany and then to the Secretariat. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would agree with the US and either specified language to concentrate or to focus on source code D, or another option, make better clear whether this decision is related to specifications in the guidance, or whether it is a general review of source codes. Thanks.
Merci. On entend bien la préoccupation.
Thank you. We can understand the concerns expressed by the United States and Germany. The Secretariat has the floor.
Pour des éclaircissements, Secrétariat.
For purposes of clarification, you have the floor, Secretariat.
Thank you, Chair. The Secretariat's understanding of Mexico's request that it's very specifically directed to the interpretation of source code D. And if the decision is broadened, it can filter into the other considerations already in terms of specimens not of wild source that is being considered by both the scientific committees and the Standing Committee. So maybe the Plants Committee could consider just narrowing it down to the specific interpretation and use of source code D, which is linked to the registration of nurseries and associated processes. So I think that will narrow it down and not result in duplication of effort. Thank you, Chair.
Merci, Secrétariat. Donc,
thank you, Secretariat. So that would have us going back to Mexico's original proposal. I give the floor to Oceania. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. My intention was to ensure that we didn't limit ourselves if we had the opportunity to review any of the source codes in this regard. If there is duplication, I'm more than happy to support Mexico's original suggestion.
Merci.
Thank you, Oceania. So let me reread the proposed, the language proposed by Mexico, just to make sure that we are all on the same page and fully understand Mexico's proposal.
Donc,
the original language proposed by Mexico was the following: analyze and identify possible inconsistencies in the use of source code D in Resolution 12.3 Rev Cop 19 on permits and certificates, 9.19 Rev Cop 15 on the registration of nurseries that artificially propagate Appendix I listed plants for export purposes, and 11.11 Rev Cop 18 on the regulation of plant trade, and provide suggestions as to deal with those inconsistencies. In this proposal 20DD, there is a clear focus on possible inconsistencies in the use of source code D in the resolutions listed 12.3, 9.19, and 11.11. Could I ask if you could agree this proposal? Thank you. I'm going to give the floor to the IWMC, who's been waiting for a while. Thank you for your patience, sir. Thank you, Madam. I fully understand why I've had to wait, but I would like to mention another issue which has to do with translation into French. That has to do with the term guidance in French. I think CITES tends to use ligne directrice rather than orientation, and I have just noted that the interpreter working earlier used the term ligne directrice, and I think that is happier language as it's a little bit stronger and a little bit more in keeping with convention practices. This is a mere suggestion, however, and I'm sure there are other French speakers here, including you, Madam, who might have a view, and that will enable us to come to a final determination. Thank you. Thank you, says the chair. Well, what would be the translation of guidelines? Or guidelines would be ligne directrice for me in French, and guidance would be orientation. But hey, I'm not a native speaker of English, says the chair.
Je vais demander au secrétariat qu'elle...
I shall request that the Secretariat inform us of the terminology that should apply to guidance. Thank you.
Asie, vous avez la parole.
Asia, you have the floor.
Chair, and thank you for reading the draft again and again. I just noticed that it is not appropriate for the Plants Committee to directly approve any revision without reviewing and considering. So we suggest to add the word review and consider, and the draft decision 20.cc, which reads the Plants Committee shall review and consider any revision of the guidance on terms related to the artificial propagation of CITES regulated plants and the guide to the application of CITES source codes, then approve for publication or something. Thank you, Chair.
Merci à la représentante.
I thank the representative of Asia. So you would suggest that for 20cc, we write the Plants Committee shall consider any revisions, I beg your pardon, shall consider any revisions. I'm not certain which is the terminology that we use within CITES. In French, that would be fine to say consider or examine. But in the case of CITES, I don't know what the standard terminology would be. So we'll ask the Secretariat to tell us, and we'll also await the response on the guidance and guidelines and whether we say orientation. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Le secrétariat pourra conduire.
Thank you very much. The Secretariat will be able to make some additional research to be certain, but the response now would be that guidance in English would be orientation in French and guidelines, ligne directrice. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Merci au secrétariat.
Thank you, Secretariat. I now give the floor to Oceania.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if it would help, but maybe we could consider whatever language was used for the NDF guidance so that it's consistent across any documents that use the term guidance.
Merci pour la...
Thank you for that suggestion. I think guidance up until now has always been translated as orientation in French.
Concernant...
Now, on revision, we do not approve, but we consider or we examine revisions. The Secretariat, please.
Alors, Asie, est-ce que...
So, Asia, if we were to write, the Plants Committee examines and approves any revisions of the document and so forth, would that suit you?
Yeah. Usually, I believe in the kind of the English version for the decision, although I'm not the English native speaker. We usually find like the review and consider, yeah, for these two verbs. So, yeah, it's just like for the rationales we made this revision. These things we have to do something before we approve kind of the revision, any revision of the existing guidance. So please help me to find a proper verb on that. Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Oui, la représentante de l'Asie.
Representative for Asia, I thought I had said instead of approving any revisions, we replace it with examine and approve. And in English, okay, review and approve. Review and approve is what the chair would like said. Oceania, you requested the floor. Does that suit you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it does suit me. I just wanted to flag that if we are going to change the language there, we might need to change it in the last line of 20AA. So it would be submit any revisions to the Plants Committee for review and approval, so it's consistent across the decisions.
Oui, en décision...
Yes, in decision 20AA. Very well. Senegal has requested the floor.
En attendant, je donne la...
While we wait, I shall give the floor to Saudi Arabia.
Just a question, is there any time for reviewing? Enough time for review?
Je donne la parole au secrétaire.
I will give the floor to the Secretariat so that they can respond.
hoping that this addresses the question. Yes, so, well, the decisions will, provided that they are accepted here and presented to the COP, the idea will be to continue improving the guidance. And as is mentioned, it will be that is a justification to include or recognize this as a living document, because there will always be changes foreseen, and especially in the use of the source codes. So I think just to reassure that the decisions would follow after this next cycle, the decisions would be either revised or renewed as appropriate, depending on the progress made in the next COP20 to COP21 cycle. Thank you.
Merci au
I thank the Secretariat for that clarification. So, I hope that you will manage to bear in mind the various amendments. So in 20AA, the decision is kept as it stands, but at the end of the sentence, we would put for review and approval. And this change would then be reflected in decision 20CC, which is directed to the Plants Committee. The Plants Committee shall review and approve any revisions with the inclusion of decision 20DD that has been proposed by Mexico. I think we can conclude on this item by saying that the Plants Committee has adopts PC 27 COM2 as amended in the meeting. Thank you.
Aussi, nous en avons.
Therefore, we have really finished our work for today. I thank you, and we'll meet again tomorrow to continue the next items on the agenda. Enjoy your evening. Thank you.